My name is Emily Warren. I'm 26 years old, and this is a real story, something that happened to me just 2 years ago, something that I still can't explain without my voice shaking. I'm telling it here because I want people to know the truth. Before it's too late for someone else, I grew up in a quiet little town in Vermont, surrounded by sprawling apple orchards that stretched for miles in every direction. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, where doors stayed unlocked, and where you'd never expect to find the sort of darkness I stumbled into. I've always believed that families carry their own secrets, little things hidden away like old letters in the attic, but I never imagined mine carried something. Alive, this story starts the day I moved back into my late grandmother's farmhouse, a place I hadn't stepped foot in since I was 12. I'd inherited it after her passing, and with student loans piling up, I thought it was my saving grace. The house stood alone at the end of a dirt road, its white paint flaking windows clouded with dust, and the orchard behind it twisted with years of neglect. When I first arrived, the air smelled of rotting fruit, sweet but sour enough to make me uneasy. Inside, nothing had changed since I was a child, the same wallpaper peeling at the edges, the same creaky floorboards that groaned under every step, but it wasn't until my second night there that I heard a slow, deliberate knock at my bedroom window from the second floor. I froze, clutching my phone, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. There was no porch roof outside that window, no tree branch close enough for someone to reach it. When I finally dared to look, there was nothing there. Nothing but the dark orchard swaying in the wind. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself it was just the house settling, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. The next morning, I decided to clear out the attic, thinking maybe a little productivity would help me feel more at home. Dust filled the air as I climbed up, coughing as I pulled the light cord. That's when I saw an old wooden crate shoved into the farthest corner, wrapped in rusted chains. It was small, barely big enough to hold a blanket, but it felt wrong, like the air around it was thicker. There was something carved into the lid, but it was faint, the letters worn down with time. I could just make out the word payback. My stomach turned. I told myself I'd leave it alone, but that night I dreamed of my grandmother, not the warm, soft woman I remembered, but something colder, her voice hoarse as she whispered, "Don't open it, Emily, it's still hungry." I woke drenched in sweat, the taste of apples strangely bitter in my mouth, and when I stepped into the hallway, I saw muddy footprints leading down from the attic. I stood frozen at the top of the stairs, staring at those muddy footprints as they trailed down the hallway toward the kitchen, each one slightly misshapen, as if the person or thing that made them wasn't used to walking like a human. My first thought was to call the police, but something deep inside told me they wouldn't understand, that they'd just write me off as a nervous woman in an old house. The prints stopped at the back door, but when I looked outside, the orchard was empty, swaying quietly in the wind. I told myself it had to be some squatter who'd found a way, and someone desperate enough to risk getting caught, and I spent the rest of the day checking every window, every lock, every hidden corner of the house. But the attic crate was still there, chained, unmoved, silent. That night I couldn't sleep, so I sat in the living room with the lights low, reading through some of my grandmother's old journals that I'd found in a desk drawer. At first they were harmless recipes, gardening notes, weather patterns. Then in one entry dated September 14th, 1979, I found something that made my skin crawl. "It's been 3 nights. The thing won't leave the orchard. It watches from the trees. I can't pay it this year. I don't have another to give." There was no explanation of what "to give" meant, but the handwriting was shaky. The ink smudged as if she'd been writing in a hurry. I was still staring at the words when I heard a long, slow creak from upstairs, like the sound of the attic door opening. My blood turned cold. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a heavy iron candlestick, and moved slowly toward the staircase. Listening for movement, the creak came again, followed by the faint sound of something being dragged across the floorboards above me. My hands were sweating so badly, I nearly dropped the candlestick. I told myself it was an animal, maybe a raccoon. But I knew I was lying. When I reached the attic stairs, the light bulb above flickered once, twice, then went out completely, plunging everything into blackness. I stood there, my breath loud in my own ears, until I heard a voice whisper my name, not from above, but from directly behind me. I spun around, swinging the candlestick, but the hallway was empty. Still, I could smell apples, fresh, crisp, but with that same bitter edge from my dream. The next morning I decided I couldn't ignore the crate any longer. I found a pair of bolt cutters in the shed and dragged them up to the attic. My hand shook as I cut through the chains, each snap echoing like a gunshot in the silence. When the final chain fell away, I hesitated, every instinct screaming at me to stop, but curiosity, or maybe something darker, pushed me forward. I lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in rotting burlap, was a small bundle of bones, Human bones, and tucked between the ribs was a withered apple, blackened and shriveled but still whole. As I stared in horror, I realized the attic air had grown heavier, warmer, and somewhere in the orchard below something began to move. I slammed the crate shut so hard the dust swirled in choking clouds, but it didn't matter. The sound coming from the orchard was growing louder, a rhythmic crunch of footsteps moving through the fallen apples, each one deliberate, unhurried, as though whatever it was already knew exactly where I was. My pulse roared in my ears as I stumbled back from the crate, nearly tripping over an old trunk behind me. The smell hit next, not the faint bitterness from before, but a thick, sickly sweet rot, like the orchard had been left to decay for decades. I crept toward the attic window and pulled back the yellowed curtain just enough to see outside. The orchard trees swayed, their bare branches scraping together like bones. In the farthest row between the crooked trunks, I saw a figure too tall to be human, with limbs that bent in ways they shouldn't, standing perfectly still and facing the house. I dropped the curtain and stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. That's when I remembered the journals. I rushed downstairs and tore through the drawers until I found the oldest one, its leather cover cracked with age. I flipped through the brittle pages, my hands trembling, until a section caught my eye. The debt began with Henry. He stole from it, and it took his son. Every 7 years it comes for another. The apple is the marker. If it's not replaced, it comes inside. I didn't know who Henry was, but the name felt heavy, familiar, a piece of my family tree I'd heard in passing. The thought that this debt had been passed down through generations made my stomach twist. I was so caught up in the words that I didn't notice the attic door had creaked open again upstairs. My heart dropped. I grabbed the candlestick from the night before and crept up every step, feeling slower than the last. Halfway up, I heard something, a dragging sound, but not across the floor this time. It was wet, like something being pulled through mud. The smell of rotting apples grew stronger until I thought I'd gag. At the top of the stairs, the crate was open. Again, the bones were gone. The burlap lay crumpled and empty, and in the center of the attic floor sat a single fresh apple, red and glistening, as if it had just been picked. I don't know why, but I stepped toward it. As I reached for the apple, something brushed past me cold fast, almost like a gust of wind, except it whispered my name as it passed. I spun around, but nothing was there. Then I noticed the footprints, not the muddy ones from before. These were wet, dark, as if made of blood bleeding from the attic down the stairs and straight toward the front door. Against every ounce of logic, I followed. The door was wide open, letting in a gust of frigid air. Out in the orchard, the tall figure was gone, but in its place, hanging from one of the apple trees, was a man's body, swaying gently, his head bowed and apples stuffed in his mouth. I didn't recognize him, but in my gut, I knew he was family. I stood in the doorway, my breath clouding in the cold air, staring at the man's swaying body. His skin was pale, waxy, and his hands hung limp at his sides, fingertips brushing the fallen apples beneath him. The apple in his mouth looked wrong, not just because of what it meant, but because it pulsed faintly, as if something inside it was alive. My instincts screamed to run, to get in my car and drive until the orchard was nothing but a bad dream in my rearview mirror, but I couldn't move. Something about the stillness of the trees, the silence except for the creak of the rope, felt like a trap, like if I turned my back, whatever was here would follow me. I forced myself forward, my boots crunching on frost-coated leaves, until I was directly under the tree. The man's face was hidden in shadow, but as the wind shifted, his head lolled to the side, and I saw my father's eyes staring back at me. My knees nearly buckled. My father had disappeared when I was 10, the police said. He'd probably left us, that maybe he'd run away from debts or a double life, but here he was dead, older, but undeniably him. I reached up to touch his arm, needing to feel if he was real, and the moment my fingers brushed his sleeve, the orchard erupted in movement. Branches shook violently, apples thudding to the ground all around me. The air turned thick, the smell of rot overwhelming, and from between the rows, I saw them, figures tall and thin like the one I'd seen before, but now there were dozens, their heads cocked at unnatural angles, each holding a blackened apple in their long, twisted fingers. They began to move toward me in perfect unison, slow but steady, their feet making no sound on the earth. I stumbled backward, my mind screaming to run, but my body felt rooted. One of them stepped forward, taller than the rest, with eyes that glowed faintly in the darkness. Its voice was a rasp dry as dead leaves. "The debt remains." My grandmother's words came flooding back. "If it's not replaced, it comes inside." I looked at the fresh apple I'd taken from the attic, still clutched in my hand. My chest tightened as I understood the apple marked the next to be taken, and it was mine. Desperation took over. I hurled the apple into the orchard as far as I could, the red blur vanishing into the dark. For a moment, nothing happened. Then every figure turned in unison and began to move away, their shapes melting into the trees until only the wind remained. I collapsed, to my knees shaking so badly I could barely breathe. But as I staggered back to the house, I noticed something on the porch, a brand new crate unchained with my name carved into the lid. I didn't open it. I packed my things that night and left the farmhouse for good. I sold the land within a month, never telling the buyer what I'd seen. But some nights, even now, I wake to the sound of apples falling outside my window, and I know deep down the debt isn't gone. It's just waiting. Thanks for watching this true story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true horror stories. This story is written and edited by Dark Lifeside Diaries.